There we go. And so I'd like to introduce our first presentation, which is from Brian Senstock and Sonia Maria, who are from the School of Nursing, Paramedicine and Healthcare Sciences. And they're presenting on a high-vis uniform, but invisible in the curriculum, LGBT inclusivity in the paramedic curriculum. So thank you very much, Sonia and Brian. I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Liz. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. I know Lisa's done a welcome to country, but I'll slides to move. I acknowledge the Wiradjuri, the Ngunnawal, Gundungurra and Biripi peoples of Australia, who are the traditional custodians of the lands, skies and waterways on which Charles III campuses are located, and pay respect to their elders past and present, and those emerging future elders. We also extend that respect to any First Nations peoples here in the session with us today. And I'd also like to acknowledge any LGBTQIA plus identifying people in the audience as well. So a little bit of background in relation to this study. One of the goals of healthcare education and in any entry to professional healthcare education program should be ensuring that graduates from the respective professional qualification are able to provide healthcare to a wide range of patient populations and to be able to do this in a culturally safe manner. In order to achieve this goal, it is imperative that the learning environment be inclusive and accepting of students who may belong to visible and non-visible minorities, thus ensuring the best chance of success for these students whilst also modelling inclusivity for all members of society. The literature quite clearly indicates that LGBTQI people in general have much lower health equality and access to healthcare than mainstream cisgender or non-LGBTQI people. The requirement to provide culturally safe care to all communities is now contained in the AHPRA and National Board's Code of Conduct, which was published in June 2022. And it now specifically moves culturally safe care beyond just cultural safety for First Nations people. And that's now enshrined in Principle 3, which is entitled Respectful and Culturally Safe Practice for All. And in particular, Principle 3.1, paragraph B, which requires respect for diverse gender identities and sexualities, both in respect of colleagues as well as clients. Principle 3.1D poses an obligation to adopt practices that respect diversity, avoid discrimination, and importantly, the need to challenge belief based upon assumptions. Support for an inclusive environment for the safety and security of individuals, patients and their family, carers and/or significant others is also considered in Principle 3.1. Principle 3.1 of the Code of Conduct is significant to the intent of this research as the principle requires the creation of positive, culturally safe work environments through role modelling and supporting the rights, dignity and safety of others, whether that be patients, students or colleagues that we work with. Interestingly, Wilson and colleagues 2020 suggests that 3.46% of the Australian population aged over 18 years identify as belonging to either a gender or sexual minority group. Percentage-wise, the percentages are actually highest in the 18 to 24-year age group, with an estimated 13.2% of that age group identify as being either sexually or gender diverse. And that's particularly significant to the research we conducted, as 71.8% of our respondents were aged 18 to 26 years. I think it's important to note that we only studied the undergraduate paramedic cohort for this particular study. We do have another cohort which has a slightly older age demographic transitioning from the nursing profession into paramedicine. That 18 to 26 year age group is consistent with the age demographic in the paramedic program at Charles III and is similar across the other paramedic programs nationally. If we fail to ensure an inclusive learning environment, essentially we're excluding on average 1.3 students in each tutorial or practical class. Or if we take that to a more broader across the year cohort, we're actually excluding about 37 to 40 students enrolled in the program. The British Society for Heart Failure in 2020 argued that it's not sufficient to passively embrace diversity, inclusion, equality and respect. To ensure true inclusion, we must challenge discriminating patterns of thought and behaviour and emanate respect and equality, modelling inclusivity in our teaching and interactions with our students does go some way to challenging these discriminating patterns of thought and behaviour whilst allowing for respect and equality. Glazard and colleagues 2020 argue that whilst homophobia, harassment and discrimination are unfortunately a reality for some students, it is actually possible for LGBTQIA+ students to experience fulfilling, enjoyable and empowering experiences at university. And these positive experiences potentially include falling in love, sexual relationships, establishing new social networks and friendships, or as Glazard and colleagues state, simply having fun. Torp Johnson, 2008, as cited in Glazard and colleagues 2020, argues that LGBTQIA+ students may experience benefits of being able to construct positive LGBTQI+ identities in a safe and accepting environment. And university is, of course, also a time where they're able to explore and develop their self-identities in what traditionally has been an accepting and liberal environment. So the study itself, as far as we're aware, this is the inaugural study of this nature with paramedic students globally, and certainly the inaugural study of this nature in a regional university. The study was actually adapted, or the study instrument was adapted from some research done by Nama and colleagues in 2017, investigating the experiences of medical students in Canada. We adapted the survey that Nama and colleagues used to ensure that the instrument was clear and fit for purpose with paramedic students, and also to contextualise it to an Australian context. We used an adaptation of the sequential exploratory approach, where we used a quantitative phase prior to the qualitative phase. And the final question on the survey provided participants an opportunity to indicate their interest in participating in a qualitative phase and allowed them to provide their contact email address for contact from the researchers. The contact details of the participants were separated by the survey administrator, the manager of SPAN and the Office of Research, separated the responses for us prior to us receiving the raw data in order to ensure that the participants remained anonymous. The aim of our study was to analyse the experiences of LGBTQIA+ paramedic students in their learning environment, but also to determine their self-reported comfort levels generally in caring for LGBTQIA+ patients. In respect of our first objective, the intent was to identify if there was any perceived heterosexism in the curriculum, and if there was, how extensive this perception was amongst the student body. Our second objective was included to allow us to identify the participants' self-reported comfort levels in order to identify if there was a specific need to include a particular identity more specifically in the curriculum and to better address the needs identified by the students. So I'll hand over now to Sonia to discuss some of the statistics.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. If you just have a look at the tables here, you can see the responses that we've got. And as it said on a few previous slides before, you could see that we had a fairly decent response rate. Almost 15% of the entire cohort actually took part in the survey, which we thought wasn't too bad. It was pretty good, considering that most students who probably wanted to take part might have been our gender diverse students. So it was interesting to have a look and see. There wasn't actually in this group, it was quite representative of really the whole cohort, which, you know, we didn't think we were going to get. Well, I didn't anyway, and that's how it worked out. So if you have a look at that, you can see that the females pretty much far outweigh the males. However, in our actual cohort of students, the male to female ratio is, you know, we have 62%, almost 63% females in our cohort, but still having a response rate of that high of females still is higher than what we would have thought would have been adequately representative of the group proportionately. So you can see 1.7 respondents identified as non-binary, and 1.7 again said that they were using a different term, which was really interesting. Some of the terminology, that how people describe themselves, which was really quite cool to see. So response rates were very similar across each of the years for the first to third year and further for students participating. And you can see that we had 29.3% in second year, which we thought was quite good as well. Majority of students identified as straight, 63%, 62.81, followed by bisexual, then lesbian, and then gay. And then this is the way that they describe themselves. A total of 11 respondents identified as being other. So this might include things like pansexual, queer, or asexual. And the number of respondents in each of these groups was lower than the minimum of 5 in that category. So we've put them together into their own category. So instead of sort of having, you know, one transgender student, we just put them together. Thanks, Brian. So on this one here, you can see this is an interesting slide. So this is their openness to disclosing their sexual orientation or gender identity to each other or to other people. And you can see there it says none is the darkest color, the lightest color is to some, and all, which you can see there is sort of the color in the middle there. And obviously, you know, the students are much more open to disclosing to other students and to other people in their own group than they are to anyone else. And the biggest difference here was actually to work integrating learning staff. That was when we looked at measuring the odds between them, that was the biggest comparison between their own peers and the WAL staff. So most common reasons for concealment were a personal belief that this information is not anyone else's business, or concern for being stereotyped, which was 24%, concern about what other paramedic students may think, that was 21%, 21.6%, and prior personal experience with harassment and or discrimination regarding LGBTQ issues, that was actually 18.9%. So this slide is just looking at the two topics of discrimination and heterosexism. So we wanted to get a feel for who had felt that they had seen discrimination or been a part of it, like been witness to it, and the same for heterosexism. Almost a third of the students, of the paramedic students, 32.5% had witnessed heterosexism. Fellow paramedic students were the most common source of heterosexism, which was 93%. Witnessing LGBTQ discrimination was less common than heterosexism. 15 students, which was 13%, said that they had witnessed it against other LGBTQ students. Paramedic students were also the most common cause of such discrimination. And I think that when you looked at that previous slide, you saw that they were the most open to that group too. So that probably stands to reason that the people that are getting the most exposure to are also the group that they're getting feedback from. So there's some relationship there most likely as well. With only a few occurrences, we only had 3 coming from academic staff or preceptors on placement sites. LGBTQ and non-LGBTQ identifying students had similar odds of witnessing or being exposed to heterosexism and anti-LGBTQ discrimination. So the odds of seeing that were very similar, but for both groups. Among those who had witnessed anti-LGBT discrimination, 5 students indicated that these incidents might have led to the victims having a lesser sense of self-worth, And 2 students felt that the victim could have perceived the situation as a potential physical threat, which is quite concerning. So that was a third of them. Thanks, Brian. Now, I quite like this. This kind of pictorially tries to represent the middle point, right? So the 0 in the center there where the line goes down is just saying, you know, most useful, less useful on one side. And you can look at the bulk of what the weight of each of what they thought on either side. So, for instance, offering services, that second one down, to students, counsellors to deal with, you know, you look at the weight is all up the top. So, you know, being quite useful to very useful, it's very heavy weighted to students saying, yeah, that looks good. That's a really great idea. I think we should do that. Whereas gender neutral bathrooms, well, people don't really, you know, it's kind of in the middle, you know. And then if you look down, you see publicising the steps your program is taking to make it a more friendly space. Students think that's a good idea too. And I think it's a great idea to try and put it out there so people know what's available and what we are doing in that space. Promoting the use of the friendly language and images, again, that's a fairly strong one. People would like to see that emphasised, you know, and it is quite useful or very useful. And again, the bottom one as well, offering additional training and education around it. So really the ones that are less are probably the gender neutral bathroom and the public publicising. And the ones that are most is offering services. So you can see that where the heaviest weight is sort of leaning not to the right there. Thanks, Brian. This is an interesting one. So in our course, you know, we're trying to teach our students how to care for patients of all backgrounds, you know, and we talk about culturally safe care, diversity, inclusivity, and things like that. And what came out through a lot of the questions and a lot of the discussions that we had was transgender people probably are the most discriminated against in all groups. And it wasn't just providing levels of care. It's like we're not, you know, representing them in our patient groups that we're providing exposure to for scenarios and things like that too. I think we're all pretty easygoing when it provides, you know, same-sex couples and things like that. But transgender people are another level, right? And I think that to try and include these people in future will be really important. That seems to be another line, there's another barrier there for them, which I think we need to try and break through. So you can see here, so whether you were gay or not and how comfortable you were in providing care to each of these groups. So yeah, you can see there that intersex, transgender, so people who are gender fluid, etc., I think they're having the hardest time in probably getting decent care provided to them too. I think we could speculate on that one. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Sonia. So the findings for the qualitative phase were again quite interesting. We used a grounded theory approach to analyse the data, and we came up with 3 key themes. And those themes were labelled as ignorant, aware, or somewhat concerningly, consciously avoiding. The overarching theme that all of those related back to was that anything that is non-clinical or considered to be non-clinical, such as diversity, inclusiveness, education, really detracts from the students' clinical learning time. They have this focus on just wanting to learn about the clinical aspects. So what we would traditionally call the soft skills rate very lowly. And anyone in the audience who teaches clinical subjects would have likely seen that in their SES scores as well. So some quotes here directly from participants, and I've broken these up into the 3 different groups. Participant VZ88 clearly stated that I can't say I've really experienced anything like that. As far as I can tell with my degree so far, people's sexuality isn't really mentioned at all. It's not really skimmed over because we're more concerned with clinical stuff. It really doesn't come up to people's sexuality and their preferences. So a tendency to avoid or be ignorant of the potential issues clinically if you have a transgender patient, and potentially overlooking good care with transgender patients. So a participant indicated they didn't think it would change their approach to a scenario. They weren't certain that it would be super helpful because a lot of the time, unless it's a query for something like an abdo query, they might not consider gender identity or sexuality as an issue in the patient care. The Aware participant VY57 indicated that they believe that more emphasis on lived experience would be beneficial for all patients that we see, because we do focus a lot on the disease and not so much on the patient. This particular participant indicated they'd like to see a change in understanding the patient side of things. And certainly having taught paramedicine previously and having thrown paramedic students into the patient role, it's a real eye-opener for the student to experience what it's like to be a patient. As most healthcare professionals know, we tend to understand our side of the role very well, but don't understand the patient side as well. And the consciously avoiding. This was the students or the participants who we think were aware of the issue, but then chose to consciously avoid. They didn't think that it mattered a huge deal. They felt that we were just trying to teach them clinically, and that if people were focusing on the personalised parts, well, as a paramedic, that's really not our job. The participant felt that it was relevant, but it was on a minimal scale, like building a rapport with your patient. You don't need to know their sexual orientation to build a rapport. Some people don't even want to share that sort of information anyway. And they said, well, when it comes to treating the patient, who cares? There's something as simple as asking the patient how they want to identify, how at the handover to nursing staff in a hospital, how would you like to be addressed? What pronouns would you like to be used? That can make such a difference to the patient seeking further ongoing care from either paramedics or from hospital staff in future. So how do we introduce LGBTQIA plus inclusivity into the curriculum? From an academic staff perspective, and this was a comment that came up in the interviews, one of the students indicated that in 3 years of studying paramedicine, they had not seen any paramedic academic staff use pronouns. So something as simple as having your pronouns on your profile makes a difference to LGBTQIA plus students. Academic staff undertaking the LGBTQIA plus awareness training, the Allied program, being a member of the Allied network, simply undertaking the awareness training and not necessarily going to the extent of becoming an ally, given that there are 2 stages to the training. Some research undertaken by Netwowski and Patel in 2020 identified the time frame or the time that needs to be allocated to the medical curriculum across the entirety of the medical degree program to ensure that medical students are comfortable with the provision of LGBTQIA plus healthcare. What they found was 35 LGBTQIA contacts and 35 LGBTQIA education hours, 10 of those education hours being curricular and 25 supplementary hours, was adequate for the students to be comfortable in delivering healthcare to LGBTQI patients. Works out at about 1 lecture and 1 tutorial or practical per year for the 3 years of the paramedic program. And of course, in the non-clinical and even the clinical subjects and disciplines, the use of scenarios in a case-based teaching approach can be used to integrate inclusivity in this context. Some other approaches for the non-healthcare disciplines, things like online modules, journal clubs, seminars, conferences, or even subject electives in this area can be used to integrate the concepts into the curriculum. So where do we go from here? Integration of the LGBTQ into the curriculum, both theory and practical, is now underway in the paramedic program. Inclusion of LGBTQ scenarios into clinical cases. Expansion of the study to all health disciplines at Charles Sturt, and myself and Sonia and Dr. Christina Griffin, Associate Head of School for Nursing, currently have an ethics application to extend this study more broadly across the health professions at Charles Sturt, and also looking at the implementation of a multidisciplinary student-led health forum on LGBTQ issues to improve understanding and inclusion going forward. The references that we've used in the presentation today, and just finally wrapping up with a take-home message that LGBTQ inclusion in the curriculum improves patient care, it increases visibility of all students, and importantly, improves student retention and student success for all students, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. And any questions?
Wow, thank you so much, Brian and Sonia. That was fantastic. Really, really insightful. I loved that. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. So if anyone would like to pop a question in the chat box or even turn off your microphone and ask a question, you are more than welcome to. I do have a quick question for you, just reflecting on you were saying about how the students were, I guess, least inclined to disclose to work integrated learning staff, which that kind of pricked my ears up a bit, particularly because, you know, it's something that we want them to be able to feel comfortable if they want to. Like, I note that you said, you know, some of them felt it's not our business, which is fair enough, but some of them were concerned about stereotypes and discrimination. So what do you think, you know, as people working in that space, we can do? What would your comments be around, you know, making students feel more comfortable and in that space and in disclosing and not feeling the risk of stereotype? Like, I think that's what really made me feel pretty awful. What are your thoughts?
I can talk if you want, Brian.
If you want, Sonia, great.
I think it, and when I looked at it from just a common sense viewpoint, that table, it's the people that they're most familiar with or around all the time that they're disclosing to, and it's the least familiar and less likely to see more often that, you know, it's proportionately downward. So I think the more often that you're around them and with them, they will feel comfortable. It's just that work integrated learning, it's just a one-off thing. The preceptor that they're with might change 4 times. They're only with them for a very short amount of time, and they probably want to impress them while they're with them. And so they're not going to be releasing that information, things that they think probably they don't need to. So I don't know if it's that they, I think given more time in a different situation, they probably would. It's just the way it is.
Thank you.
But you're doing a good job if you're making them comfortable, right? Like I think that's the right angle.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, opening up that, you know, opportunity for them to fully engage with the learning experience and things and not be worried about, you know, stereotypes and things. Someone's got a question confirming that almost 40% of respondents indicated that they identified as something other than heterosexual.
We could probably change that, put that slide back up again. So the 37.2% of that group. But don't forget, this is, you know, proportionately, we've probably got more people who have an interest in this topic who are applying to the survey, right? So we don't have an exact replication of the population here. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Sonia and Brian. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for presenting today. And, you know, we can all virtually clap for you. Yeah, thanks, Annabelle, for starting that off. That's fantastic.
Thanks, Celeste.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And so now we have a presentation from Claudia Diaz on Science Meets Art, recommendations for learning anatomy. And Claudia, you're presenting on behalf of a group of academics from across FOSH, I believe. Is that right? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm in the anatomy and physiology group.
Fantastic. If you'd like to share your screen, go ahead and I'll do the same for you and put my hand up at 20 minutes.
God, I've got 2 talks up here. Sorry, I'm doing one talk after another, so just making sure I've got the right talk for teaching. Yes. Okay, can you see that?
We can see teaching paradigms.
Yeah. Okay.
New environments.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
it. Science Meets Art. Yep.
Happy to start. Okay, thank you. So my name's Claudia. I'm from Anatomy and Physiology, And today, what I'd like to do is address the issues that I have encountered trying to introduce my innovative teaching approaches here at CSU and how I'm actually dealing with them. So to give you a bit of background, my teaching philosophy has always been about helping students to learn how to learn anatomy. So I want to do that to achieve deeper learning and long-term retention of information. And I've tried to do this by offering meaningful and engaging learning experiences for my students. Now, I do have a worldwide reputation for my innovative approaches to teach human anatomy, and I've used this at 5 Australian universities so far, and I was fortunate enough to win an ALTC Teaching Award for this work years ago. Now, in Queensland, where I started or where I did a lot of the work, I had a lot of positive experiences, particularly with an aspect of it, which is my anatomical body painting that I did with the students. They absolutely loved this. And we did things called body painting projects. And that was where we basically painted a person from head to foot. And it was done by a student team. So a model was a student, 4 or 5 artists, and a photographer. Now, this one you can see here was Skeletal Man. And we did this. This is really cool. We did this at a Groove and the Moo music festival, and it took us 20 hours to do. But what was really cool was that I had my students volunteering, and they body painted 300 people from the general public. So I have to tell you that seeing young people body painted in the mosh pit was probably something I'll never see again. It was amazing. And I was also fortunate enough to be able to get Julia Gillard to do a little bit of body painting when she visited my lab a few years ago. So I've done 17 of these body painting projects over the last 12 years, and I'm just going to flash through a few of them so you can get a sense of what they are. Very big projects, 20 to 24 hours they take to complete. I've done anatomical man, anatomical woman, pregnant woman was an amazing one to do. Another anatomical man, multicolored man, and systems man. Now, out of all of these projects, the most publicized one was one of the ones I did in Melbourne here. And this was really cool because when we finished painting Zach was the model, we took him onto Swanston Street, which is a major street in the CBD in Melbourne. And the look on people's faces walking by was amazing. It was a lot of fun. So these body painting projects and the body painting work that I've done has been published in over 60 countries around the world. It's had a lot of followings on social media, and it's almost up to 500,000 views on YouTube. So very popular, especially with the students. Now, anatomy is a difficult subject. So anybody, and I know the paramedics as well, anybody who's done anatomy knows it's hard. The students have to learn a lot of new concepts and complex terminologies. So what students tend to do is they tend to concentrate on surface learning. And this is things like rote learning and memorization. Now, I'm trying to change that. That's my mission. I'm trying to change that historical view regarding anatomy teaching by laying a different foundation for a new approach to learn anatomy. So the work I do is pretty much hands-on, and this is to achieve long-term retention of information and deep learning. So my classes are non-didactic, they're self-directed, group-based, proactive, experiential, flexible, student-centered, and inclusive. And I have to say, probably the most important part is that this teaching is very engaging and a lot of fun. Students really, really love it. So as a teacher, I try to aim to think outside the square in everything I do. Now, at Charles Sturt University, as you know, all classes on campus in 2020 were cancelled due to the COVID pandemic, and it happened really quickly. Basically, I had 2 weeks to change the way this particular subject was taught, and all the anatomy classes had to be redesigned and implemented in an exclusively online anatomy subject, which had online practical classes replacing the classes that usually ran on campus. Now, this actually consisted of, I put together 20 pre-recorded videos. They were prepared in the anatomy teaching laboratory where I used cadaveric tissues to show the students. And then we had discussions that were interactive in tutorials online. Now, my innovative approaches, I also introduced these because I wanted to try to find a way to address the engagement issues. Now, the students doing this subject, just to give you a background, have no science background. Most of them are mature age teachers or a lot of humanities graduates. So for them, learning anatomy is really hard. Now, what I found was by using the innovative approaches combined with the videos, the students were really, really creative. And you can see some of their work here. They made all this, and and these are kids who knew nothing. Very, very creative, and surprisingly, or I was very pleased by this, the results were amazing as well. So there was statistically significant increases in high distinctions and a really marked decrease in fails. And this is compared to the previous 3 years of this same subject, where it was run not online, it was actually on campus. So I think this showed that the videos and the encouragement of the innovative learning was a really novel experience, and it provided an efficient and engaging approach to do a substitute to the normal face-to-face teaching. Now, I have to tell you, in this particular subject, it's called head and neck anatomy. This year has been the most successful that I've ever run. It's been really amazing. I have students this year who were outstanding in their efforts, their enthusiasm, their creativity, and in the results that they've achieved. I have one particular student, Ben, and Ben is shown here. Ben is a superstar. Ben has a background in linguistics, so he knew nothing. So he knew that he had to find a way to learn this stuff, and he was very creative, and he had an enormous amount of creative work that he shared with the class through our discussion board. So it worked very well for peer learning. So he did pictures, videos, songs, dances, and all of the students were creative. I mean, for example, Dina made a brain out of a cauliflower. Now, I have to tell you, in all my years, I've never seen somebody do something like that. So the fact that students were coming up with things that even I hadn't thought of, I thought was amazing. Now, some students were very smart and they used family. Sophie painted on her father, so that was very creative. And generally, there was just a lot of songs, a lot of videos created. So Rochelle, for example, wrote 5 songs about anatomy in a few months. Ben and his classmates all made a lot of videos. So basically, this teaching was all, this learning was all active and engaging learning. So the benefits of the innovative learning approaches are countless. I think the innovative learning provides really good, efficient learning that's highly engaging, motivating, and it encourages the students to develop self-directed learning skills. Now, this is a subject I run in session 2. Surprisingly, I have not had this level of success with the internal students that attend face-to-face teaching at the Albury campus in session 1. So these tend to be younger cohorts of students, and I've found that it's a real challenge to enthuse many of these students to try innovative, non-didactic, self-directed approaches to learning. Now, although some of those students are very keen and did do a lot of innovative work, most of them tended to prefer the didactic teaching, and they wanted to be spoon-fed, and they were very set in their ways and not as receptive to new ways of learning. Now, the other thing, and some of you may or may not relate to this, is that some of these students tended to provide very negative feedback at the end of session, which I personally found to be a very big blow, and it often affected my confidence and my drive. However, I think this is a challenge for me, and I accept the challenge. So to me, challenge is an opportunity. So what I've actually done is I've come up with a set of recommendations of how I might try to deal with this issue. Now, I will go through these one at a time. The first one is that in October this year, I was actually able to run the first ever online innovative anatomy workshop. We did this on Zoom, and it was really successful. We had students from Australia and from overseas participating. And it was really cool because the students came in and they all did different things. Some of them were using Play-Doh, some of them were drawing, some of them were body painting, but they did it together. They asked each other for advice, they had discussions, and they basically worked on this themselves. It was really good, and it also served as a great revision for these students who had an exam coming up in 2 weeks' time. So I'm thinking that this might be a strategy that I might want to offer the internal students next year to see if they're enthusiastic. I know, these are mature age students, but I know that the younger students do like to do a lot of the online learning, so maybe it will work with them. Now, next year, I hope to run the first body painting project here in Albury. I have been trying to do it this year, but it's a real struggle to get students willing to commit. I do have 3 students who are very, very keen to do this, but I need a few more. So I'm going to look for more artists and a model, and hopefully we'll be able to get this up and running next year sometime. Now, I'll also be holding an anatomical art exhibition of all my body painting work. I have thousands and thousands of pictures. I want to exhibit some of them. And this will happen with student involvement, and it's going to occur at the Art Partners Art Gallery here in Albury in April 2023. The exhibition is going to run for 1 month, and I hope that some students will be actually attending where they can actually do some body painting, you know, in front of people from the public to show them exactly what it's all about. So I think this is going to be a community event, and it's going to be great promotion and publicity for CSU. So I'm hoping that if this is successful, I might be able to run similar exhibitions at other campuses around the country, perhaps Bathurst or Wagga Wagga in future. Now, there are cross-campus issues regarding the implementation of these innovative teaching approaches. So I only teach at Albury internal students, but I would be very keen to implement similar approaches at other campuses around the country. However, we need to avoid equity issues regarding delivery differences between campuses, and that's a problem I've had up until now. Of course, it's going to depend on having the academics on board. I can't make people want to do this, but if academics are keen, then I'm very willing to help them to provide the training necessary and to travel to the campuses if needed. Lastly, I have tried to make an outstanding and significant contribution to the work integrated learning, the WIL space, by creating transformative online learning student experiences. Now, during WIL, students have the opportunity to undergo experiential learning that involves active participation, experimenting, investigation, and exploring a new work environment. So I use innovative approaches to teach anatomy that are based on engagement theory and experiential learning by Cole. So I'd like to investigate the possibilities of integration of innovative learning approaches, including the anatomical body painting, as an area for WIL in the health sciences and perhaps also in the marketing area at CSU. So the integration of innovative approaches and WIL at CSU could be an important strategy exercise for enrolments, because I think many students may be attracted to these opportunities. So I've actually put together a marketing plan, and this is to work on these recommendations. So this is looking at basically looking at the situation, looking at what goals I have, what my target audiences are going to be, how I'm going to have tactics and plans to carry this out, and last of all, the budget. Now, I do embrace the challenge to promote my innovative work. I have a lot of experience working with the media in the past, so newspapers, radio, television. I have my own Facebook page called Innovative Anatomy, which has almost 4,000 followers all around the world. And I am confident about promoting this work around Albury. My target audience for the marketing will initially be the university, so CSU News, the media department, who I have already contacted, and Open Day Promotions. So I will also promote this work professionally by actually publishing a journal article next year in an art-science journal. And I'll promote this work in the community. That's going to be the major promotion. And that'll be done through the art galleries, local groups, social media, local radio, newspapers, TV. I do have a lot of experience working in a community team, and I really enjoy showing people in the community what we do and especially how we do it. So as I said, I think this work could be great promotion for the university, and it will certainly help to attract students to our courses. I'm hoping that if these activities are successful in Albury, I might be able to promote similar ones at other CSU sites in future. So I've already got a few sponsors on board, two to be precise, and I'm seeking a few more so that I can try and get all the money that I need to actually carry out these activities. So this is basically where I'm up to now, and I'm hoping that I will have further successes next year with this work, but that was all I wanted to talk about today. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank Thank you very much, Claudia. That's very interesting. Does anybody have any questions? You're welcome to put them in the chat box or to take your microphone off mute. Claudia, I'm interested because I'm a very non-artistic person, and I presume some students are as well.
Yeah.
How do you go? And I guess as well, that makes me think about the transferability of this to other cohorts. For example, like say Year 12 students who might be interested in getting into health degrees and using it to attract them. What do you think, like how easily adaptable is it to people who are non-artistic?
Look, it is very, I'm not artistic. People can't believe I do body painting projects because I'm a stick figure person, but you can, because what I do with my students is I kind of show them that you have to look at your own strengths and find something that you're good at. So a student who might not be good at painting might be good at drawing or sketching something on a whiteboard or doing, so I use a lot of whiteboarding, Play-Doh, body painting, singing, and I think I'm very, very big on singing. If you sing something, you'll remember it, okay? So there's a lot of things that these kids can do. And in the past, when I was a head of department in Queensland, I actually used to bring in all kinds of people to the anatomy lab. I brought in children from a childcare centre. I brought in high school kids. I brought in senior citizens. So I'm a great believer in that any of this stuff can be done by anybody of any age. It is really about being inclusive and showing the students that they have to find what works for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've just got a comment from Letitia. This is wonderful and would show potential students not to be afraid of anatomy, that there is huge support and ways of learning. Thank you. I definitely agree with it. I still think I can't remember anything I learned about anatomy, and I could
because you didn't learn lessons. I would say you didn't learn it properly, and it's about changing. Unfortunately, we train our kids in high school to memorize everything. It's the worst thing we do. It's really, really bad. The first thing I say to my students on day one is, there will be no memorizing in my classes. I don't accept it. You have to learn in different, and that's why you offer them different alternatives, and you can teach them to do deep learning. It just takes a bit of work. You need to untrain them before you can retrain them. Yeah.
Claudia, that was wonderful. I've seen you present before in the UDL space, and I think Claudia's work is really a fantastic example of good universal design, and where that how they present the students present their assessment is left up to them, but that they have to, that intrinsic motivation of having to find a way to demonstrate their learning, I think is really, really clever, Claudia. So yeah, and after I met you the last time, I went and had a look at all your work. It is terrific.
And can I just say that here at CSU, one of the ways I assess my students, which I think is really good for academic integrity, is I do oral examinations. And I love the oral examination because I can tell you the student is in front of me. They can't cheat. But not only that, they actually do things like things with their hands, and all the stuff I've taught them, they actually use it. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So I think we need to think about changing our assessment techniques, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And that reflects what Philip was talking about this morning in terms of academic integrity and what we need to change. So thank you very much, Claudia. Well, that brings our presentations to an end for this session. I just want to remind everyone about the link to the feedback form, which is at the top of the chat box. If you can go into that and please provide us some feedback for the future iterations of CS EdX. And thank you very much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing everyone at some other sessions. Thank you.